right, so for the second part of our Baywatcher monitoring program is what we call the nutrient monitoring. That's when we actually collect samples from the bay and take them to the Marine Biological Laboratory for analysis. So on your weekly schedule, the days that are highlighted in blue, which is 2 days in July and 2 days in August, there's going to be a set of the Baywatcher volunteers that'll help us collect samples on those days. So this schedule, which is your weekly sampling for dissolved oxygen, temperature, and salinity, the nutrient schedule on those 4 dates, we're just doing temperature, salinity, water clarity, and then collecting samples. So you don't have to do your dissolved oxygen sampling. On this schedule, we have it set up on different days, and it's during the last 3 hours of an outgoing tide. So these time frames are a little different than the regular 6 to 9 monitoring. And this summer, it's going to be on July 13th, July 27th, August 9th, and then a week away on the August 17th. So for the nutrient sampling, you will get an additional cooler, and in here there's going to be a bag with a folder in here with some additional information and your data sheets and the instructions on how to do the nutrient sampling, filtering, and then how to bring back the cooler with the sample bottles. The nutrient sampling that we're doing, it says on your instructions, we're going to be sampling for nitrogen levels, phosphorus levels, carbon, as well as chlorophyll A, which is the green pigment in algae and phytoplankton. So a couple days before the actual nutrient sampling day, you will have to come by the Buzzards Bay Coalition Science and Field Operations Center located here in Marion to pick up your cooler and the supplies that you'll need for that morning to go out and collect the samples. When you pick up your cooler, you will have the sample bag in here, and inside this bag, there's a folder that will include the sampling schedule, a copy of the instructions and protocols, a map of the different sites that you will go to, a couple copies of the data sheet that you fill out on that day, as well as another copy of your yellow salinity chart. In addition to the paperwork in this bag, you will have a syringe, a filter holder unit, a box of little filters to go into that filter holder unit, a pair of tweezers or forceps that we use to pick up the filters, and a Sharpie marker. And then in your cooler as well, you will have ice packs that you'll have to remember to put in the freezer the night before, and then your sampling bottles that you will use to collect in the field, as well as smaller bottles that you will filter back at home after you've done collecting in the field. And occasionally throughout the summer, some of the volunteers will also collect an additional sample, which we call our duplicate sample. We will try to label the top of your cooler with a piece of tape that says dupe or duplicate. And what that means is inside your cooler, you have an extra set of bottles. And so when you collect one sample at one of the sites, you'll have an extra bottle to collect your duplicate sample. In addition to that, some volunteers that do sampling in the freshwater system will have one extra little clear bottle with the letters TP on. This is for collecting a total phosphorus sample, and we only do that in the freshwater systems. So the first thing you'll do the morning of the sampling is to remember to get your ice packs back out of your freezer and put them back in your cooler so that you have them with you when you're out in the field collecting your samples. It's good to get a clipboard for your data sheet when you're out in the field, and you will need your sampling test kit with your graduated cylinder and hydrometer for figuring salinity, your thermometer for getting the temperature, your Secchi disc for doing water clarity and total depth, and then just your rinse bottle, but you do not need the blue dissolved oxygen test kit. Once you have your ice packs in your cooler, you can actually leave the smaller bottles back at home because you don't need to fill these in the field. We will be filtering some of the water from the larger bottle into these smaller bottles, unless you're doing a freshwater site and you have the one with the TP on the top. That one you will need to take with you. So when you arrive at your site, the first thing you're going to do is fill out the top information on your data sheet. You're going to put your name so we know who collected the samples, the collection date, including the year on there, and then at the first station that's listed on your data sheet, you're going to write down what time you're there ready to collect your sample, and then what depth you're going to collect your sample. And we collect our samples at 15 centimeters below the surface, which is approximately 6 inches. So on your data sheet, you'll write 0.15. Then you will open up your cooler and pull out your first sample bottle, the brown bottle with the label on it, and you're going to write that station location. So here we are at SH1, the day that we're actually out there ready to collect our sample with the year, and then the time that we're here ready to collect. So if we're here at 7 o'clock a.m., we'll write 7 o'clock on our sample bottle. Okay. All right, once you have your bottle labeled with the station ID, date, and time, and we're ready to collect, take the cap off. We're going to take our bottle, turn it upside down, invert it, plunge it underwater halfway up our forearm, and then rotate our wrist. Let some of the water go in, bring it up, cap it, shake it, and dump it out to rinse the bottle. So this is just the rinse before we actually collect our sample. So rinse it, dump that water back out, and then repeat that process, filling the bottle up the whole way completely. Put the cap back on, and then put it back into your cooler with your ice packs, and there we've just completed our first sample at this location. Okay, once you've collected your samples, the next thing you're going to do is open up your test kit to pull out your Secchi disc, which is attached to a tape measure, and we'll use this to get water clarity, which is our Secchi disc depth, as well as the total depth at the station. When you lower the Secchi disc into the water, you're watching it with your eyes to see how deep you can still see the black and white disc. And when it disappears from your view, you'll notice the level on your tape, and that's your Secchi depth that you will write onto your data sheet. And then you will lower the disc completely to the bottom, and again look at your tape, and this will be the total depth at your station that day where you collected your samples. The next thing you would do is we're going to collect some water in our graduated cylinder from our kit, and we're going to measure the temperature of the water as well as use a hydrometer to figure out the salinity of the water at our site. So to fill your graduated cylinder, it's the same as like when you fill the bottles. You're going to take your graduated cylinder, turn it upside down, invert it, plunge it halfway down your forearm underwater, get some water in the cylinder. When you bring it up, you may have to dump off a little bit so that the water level is about an inch down in the cylinder. And then you're going to take your hydrometer out of the protective PVC case, and you will lower your hydrometer down into the sample, and where the top of the water intersects on your hydrometer, you're going to read those numbers and write that down as your hydrometer reading on your data sheet. Then pull your hydrometer out, and you can rinse it off with the fresh water in your little rinse bottle. And then to protect the hydrometer, we put it back in the PVC case with the cap, and that can go back in your kit. And then right after you do the hydrometer reading, you will take the temperature of the water that's in that cylinder. And from the temperature of the thermometer and the hydrometer readings, we can figure the salinity using that yellow salinity chart that is in your folder. All right, we're all done collecting samples. Should we stop for ice cream?
No, Tony, we got to get the samples back to Marion so we can send them to the lab.
Okay. Once you've collected your samples, you're keeping them in your cooler with the ice packs. We want to keep the samples cold or cool, either ice packs or you can add additional ice, and then bring them back to the Marion Center to drop them off so that we can get them to the Marine Biological Laboratory as soon as possible. For the volunteers that live on the Cape, I will probably just have you deliver them directly to the Marine Biological Center. When you get back to your house, or if you want to come here to the Marion Center to do the filtering, this is the next step on your instructions. So the front page talked all about labeling your bottles, collecting the samples, doing temperature, salinity, water clarity, and depth. On the back part, Up at the top where it talks about TP in red, that was the little bottle that you collected in the field if you were doing a freshwater site with TP on. Once you've collected that and put it in your cooler, it stays in your cooler until it gets to the lab. So you don't need to do anything with that bottle. The other part that talks about doing filtering back on shore as soon as possible, this is talking about filtering some of the water from the large brown bottle through this little filter apparatus in your bag into the small 60 cc bottle. The other thing that you would do when you're back at your house is take your thermometer reading and your hydrometer reading and refer to the yellow salinity chart in order to figure out what the salinity was at each station where you collected your sample and took those two measurements. So you can write that now on your data sheet. Salinity for our day was 28 parts per thousand at that site. Then what you will do is you will pull out one of the little, these are called 60 cc bottles, and you will label it with the identical information that matches one of the brown sample bottles that you collected in the field. So you'll write the identical station ID, and in this case we're at SH1, the collection date, which was 7/13/23, and then the time that it was collected, which was at 7 o'clock a.m. So this label will match this label, which will also match your data sheet when you filled it out in the field. Once you have your bottle labeled, we then need to set up our filter unit with one of the filters in this little case, and we use the little tweezers to pick up the filter to put it into the filter unit. The filter unit has a top part that unscrews, and then there's a little cap and a bottom part, and the filter goes between the cap and the bottom part where those two little white discs are. We try to keep everything clean, so try to do it at a kitchen area where you can maybe wipe off the counter or lay down some paper towels, because what we're doing is filtering the particles that are in this water out of the water, and the little bottle will just have all the dissolved nutrients. Both sample bottles will be analyzed at the lab for particulate matter as well as dissolved nitrogen and nutrient material. To set up your filter, take off the little cap. You'll have your little tweezers, and these filters are in this little packet, and they're separated by a blue wax paper, and then there's the white filter. They're very similar in color, but you don't want to use the wax paper. That we can just discard. You just want to pick up one of the little white filters using your tweezers. And then just make sure you don't have the next blue wax paper stuck to the bottom of it. The little white filter is what we will lay on the bottom of our filter unit. I like to put the cap back on my filters to keep them clean. And then I'll take the cap of the filter unit, lay that on top there. There's like a little lock and key mechanism. And then the ring screws onto the top. When you screw this on, it's going to start to get hard or tight, but you want to keep turning it all the way until it doesn't move anymore. This means that the O-rings that are in here will seal it, so when we push water through, none of the water will leak around the filter. So now we have our filter set up in our filter unit. Then to fill the syringe from your bottle, you're going to pull out the plunger from your syringe, take your brown bottle, shake it up a little bit so everything's mixed up uniformly in there. Take the cap off. And if you do this at a kitchen sink or maybe somewhere where you can have a bucket, you're going to put your little finger over the tip of the syringe, take this bottle, fill the syringe up all the way to the top, and then to replace the plunger, you have to move your little finger as you push in on the plunger. And you'll hear that clicking noise, and you should still have at least 60 milliliters still in your syringe. Next, we're going to take our filter unit that we just put the filter in, and we're going to put this on up to the syringe. We always say cup side up. So this end looks like a little cup. The other end has just the point sticking out. So put the cup side up towards the syringe, push it on. And now we're going to rinse that filter, even though we used the tweezers to pick it up and put it in there, by pushing half of this water through that filter in the filter unit and just discard it either down the drain or into your bucket. So push down on your syringe until you get the plunger to the 30 mark. That water will only come out the tip. If you see it leaking around the edges, it may mean that you don't have that ring tight enough and it's going around the O-rings. So push it down to the 30 mark. And now we've rinsed our filter. We're going to use the rest of this water to rinse out the little 60 cc bottle that matches that we just labeled. So now you can take the cap off of this bottle, put your filter unit right near or on the top, and push the rest of this water through our rinsed filter into the little 60 cc bottle. When I'm pushing down on the plunger, I like to use this hand to hold the bottle and the filter unit so I don't tip it over. And now I will do the same like we did in the field. Replace the cap, give it a little shake, and then dump that out. And all of that was to rinse this little bottle. Now I have my filter rinsed, my little bottle that I'm going to be filtering into rinsed, and now I'm going to pull this off and refill the syringe with our sample from the brown 1 liter bottle. So again, put your little finger over the tip, pour this in the top, move your little finger as you replace the plunger. You should still have 60 in there. Replace your filter that you've in your filter unit back onto your syringe, and now we're going to push the full 60 through our filter into the little 60 cc bottle. And so what that filter paper is doing is separating the particulates from the dissolved nutrients. As you do this, that little filter is going to start to become dirty or clogged with everything that we're filtering out. So it may get a little harder to push down on the plunger. If you can keep some steady downward pressure, the water will still go through. Also, when you're pushing on this, you want to push straight down. Don't go sideways too much or you could break the tip of the syringe off in the little filter unit. Completely push the full plunger amount in. Take the cap, put the cap back on this bottle. It should be filled up to about the shoulder of the bottle. Put the cap back on this bottle because the laboratory needs both bottles. And then both of these bottles can go back into your cooler. And then the next thing that you will write on your data sheet where it says filter time on shore, you will write down what time you just sat here and filtered that sample. That way we know how long it's been from when it was collected until it was filtered. Then to clean up for the next bottle sample, you can take the plunger off of your filter unit, or the syringe off, pull out the plunger, give this a good rinse with your rinse water or under your kitchen sink. So we rinse it with fresh water in between each sample. We now separate the filter unit to pull out that filter that we just used, and we will put a new filter in for the next sample. So undo the ring, lift off the cap. That little paper that we used, we're not going to use it again, so you can peel that off with your fingers. This side will be clean, and the side that we push the water through, you will notice all of the particulates that you filtered out of it. This you can then throw away. We will rinse this off with our rinse water again so it's clean for the next sample. I like to rinse the base, the cap, and the ring. And now it's ready for me to use my tweezers, pick out another white filter, reassemble it, pull out the next brown bottle, and continue in my filter. When you are all done with your filtering, You can then make sure that all of your equipment is rinsed at your kitchen sink or with fresh water so that it's clean, because you will be holding on to this until the next time. So rinse out your syringe, rinse your filter units, top, bottom, and ring, so that they are rinsed with fresh water. And then your box of filters, along with your Sharpie and your tweezers, can all go back into your bag. Let your filter unit dry out over in air temperature overnight, and then bring your cooler with your sample and your filtered sample back to the Marion facility to drop it off to us, and we will deliver it to the Marine Biological Laboratory. So we will get your cooler back with your samples as well as your data sheet, and when you drop this off to us, you will sign the bottom with the date and time that you are delivering it or relinquishing it back to us, and then we will sign that we have received it. Once the lab gets the bottles, they will start the analysis of the samples. We will get the coolers back with some clean bottles, and we will prepare them, fill the coolers again with ice packs in the bottles, so that you can come pick it up for the next round, which is about 2 weeks after each round that we do our sampling. If there's any questions, be sure to let me know. Do the best you can to collect as many samples as you can. We work from the inner parts of the harbors to the outer, weather dependent. Safety is most important. And we appreciate all your help in collecting these nutrient samples all around the coastline of Buzzards Bay.